Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm Edita Birnkrant. I'm the campaigns director for Friends of Animals. And Friends of Animals is an international animal advocacy organization. We were founded way back in 1957 in New York. And I run our New York office. So I lead efforts to ban horse-drawn carriages, challenge the fur trade, transform policies for urban and suburban wildlife. And in addition to vegan advocacy, I work on numerous state legislative issues both in New York and in other states. So Friends of Animals places veganism, critical habitat, wildlife protection, sanctuary support, and environmental issues at the core of animal advocacy. Our programs and services provide assistance for wild and domestic animals throughout North America and West Africa. And FOA is in a unique position because we do both advocacy and hands-on work. We operate a San Antonio, Texas animal sanctuary, primarily primates, and behind me are just a few of the residents that we care for. And we have over 450 primates, birds, and other animals. And most of these animals there are endangered, including chimpanzees, lemurs, spider monkeys, and so many more. And many of these animals are cast-offs of animal research, the pet trade, and show business. And after being released from their former lives of exploitation and mistreatment, they are now given the best care possible at our sanctuary. And we also have two very important projects in Africa. We sponsor the remarkable chimpanzee rehabilitation project in the Gambia and Africa. And there's just some pictures behind that I'll show you. This incredible project has been in existence for more than 3 decades, and it's Africa's longest running chimp rehabilitation project. And more than 100 chimpanzees live freely within their own family groups on 3 isolated forested islands in the middle of the River Gambia, set within the national park there. So in 1979, there were orphaned chimps whose parents had been poached and a sanctuary was needed. And this project provides as natural a life for them as possible. And the islands are also in the habitat of manatees, hippos, and other highly endangered species. So this is really a remarkable project that's very rare. And our second project in Africa funds the protection and recovery of 3 endangered African antelope species, and they're there behind me. So we've been instrumental in establishing and maintaining a recovery program for the scimitar horned oryx and the dama gazelle in Senegal. And we've been working with Senegal's National Park Agency to restore these 2 species to 2 reserves managed by the agency. And we're working to improve the habitat conditions within Furlough National Park so that the scimitar horned oryxes and dama gazelles can eventually be released from the fenced area into the national park. And we've funded and assisted in the delivery of scimitar horned oryxes to the Gwembel Fauna Reserve in northwestern Senegal. And due to successful breeding efforts, there are now 246 oryxes, 35 dama gazelles, and 6 addax in semi-captivity within the 2 reserves. So we also run the nation's first and longest low-cost spay neuter program, facilitating over 2.6 million surgeries for dogs and cats, and we support and fund TNR projects for feral cats across the country. And we also produce the documentary called 10 Lives, a feral cat documentary. And if anyone here has heard of it, I highly recommend watching it. It really just gives a very thorough introduction into TNR work and feral cats, and it's been airing on PBS, so if you want to look that up and see it when it's airing. And in 2013, FOA established the Wildlife Law Program to fill a niche between animal and environmental activism. Because animal activists often fail to utilize fully the array of local, state, federal, and international environmental laws as a mean to protect the rights of animals to live free from human intervention. So the mission of the Wildlife Law Program is to utilize the law for a singular purpose, to ensure the right of all wildlife to live in an ecosystem free from manipulation, exploitation, or abuse. And I'll go into a little more detail later about some of the specific legal defenses that our attorneys are working on. And we also publish 2 vegan cookbooks, Dining with Friends, The Art of North American Vegan Cuisine, and The Best of Vegan Cooking. Both of them are at our table. And we produce and distribute vegan restaurant guides, it's pictured behind me, for several cities, including San Francisco. So We have a load of them at our table. I recommend if you don't have, pick some up for friends. They're just a great resource. We go through by neighborhood. Every single vegetarian and vegan restaurant in the Bay Area is listed. So this is a great resource for people who are maybe new to a plant-based diet and they say, well, where do I eat? Where can I go? This is like a great resource. And we also published something called vegan starter guides, and that's pictured behind me as well. And these are booklets that are really an invaluable asset in helping transform people's ideas about animals and provide the why and how to in becoming vegan, and we also have those available. So I recommend stopping by our table and picking up some. So I hope that gives sort of a thorough background on Friends of Animals for those of you not familiar with our work. And my talk today is titled, Is it enough to say end factory farming or go vegan? So I'm going to tie in a few different issues, and I'll start with this question. Is it enough for animal advocates to promote end factory farming campaigns as a major part of their advocacy? So by now, most people are aware of the term factory farming and what it entails. So by a show of hands in this room, who here knows what factory farming is? Okay. So I'm going to say that that's almost everyone, right? Because there's been a lot of high-profile campaigns geared towards educating consumers and the public about the reality behind factory farming. And behind me are just a few examples on the slide of different organizations that have factory farming campaigns. And mainly these campaigns, they focus on the environmental and ethical issues connected to these industries, in addition to the threat to human health that factory farms pose. So, there's been many photos and undercover videos released of what goes on in factory farms and what the horrific standard practices are for animals. And of course, most everyone here is aware of factory farms and what they are. But, what they are, the definition is that they're used to describe intensive agricultural farming practices for animals bred, raised, and slaughtered for meat, eggs, and dairy. And as you can see in the pictures behind me, it entails mass amounts of animals intensively confined in overcrowded conditions, given antibiotics, growth hormones, and forced to endure brutal living conditions until they are slaughtered. And according to the World Watch Institute, as of 2006, 74% of the world's poultry, 43% of beef, 50% of pork, and 60% of eggs were produced this way. And it's almost been a mantra by many animal welfare groups and individuals, end factory farming. And there is no doubt that factory farming is a nightmare. But if we're asking to end something, what are we advocating should replace it? And that is a very important question. And unfortunately, many consumers have translated the end factory farming message to equal buy humanely raised, free-range animal products, or what I will ironically refer to as happy meat. Some of you here have probably heard of that term, used to describe, humane meat. And the problem with that is that there is no such thing as humanely raised and killed animal products, but the public is being duped into believing there is. The happy meat market has exploded in the past several years. Fraudulent labels such as humane certified, cage-free, free-range, grass-fed, organic, local, and sustainable delude consumers into believing that if they spend a little more to purchase these products, they can eat cows, chickens, pigs, lambs, turkeys, ducks, eggs, and milk from idyllic, humane farms that treat animals with respect and kindness. In essence, the message being given to the public is that you can be an animal rights activist by eating animals exploited and killed if they have the proper label on them. And this slide behind me just shows some of these labels. So what about these labels then? What does it really mean? The truth is that companies decide independently what to call humane, and the USDA merely verifies that the company follows these completely arbitrary standards. And under this kind of scheme, a company doesn't have to make any actual concessions to animal welfare, yet they still receive these labels that make consumers feel good. So obviously this is a problem. And the truth of what goes on in these places that are called humane and have these labels, there's just some photos behind me of just examples. The top slide shows a free-range egg farm, and I don't think this would be anyone's idea of what a free-range egg farm is. Often this means thousands of hens crammed into a shed, and they're still undergoing the same traumatic experiences. It's the same sabotage of motherhood for hens and cows. Same slaughter techniques are used. There's mutilations performed with no anesthetic because that's not allowed on these farms to get the certain organic labels. Illness is treated with no antibiotics. And there's many, many documented cases of abuse. In some cases, even more horrific than what goes on in factory farms. So this is what we're dealing with the truth behind these labels. And many people are totally unaware of this. So I'm just going to go through some of the myths and truths behind these labels. An issue that maybe some of you are not aware of is that supporting free-range, sustainable, so-called products affects many more animals beyond just the ones killed for the meat or animal products. So there's an issue going on now where ranchers and government agencies are wiping out so many species, and this includes wild horses, bison, wolves, and coyotes and other predators. And this is a problem across the entire country. And this is happening because the demand for this meat has increased, and the government is putting ranchers' interests first. And these ranchers don't want to share their land or have any of these predators or wild horses near their livestock. So wild horses are on their way to becoming extinct. Bison are on their way to becoming extinct. Wolves and coyotes are being wiped out. So the idea that somehow eschewing factory farmed animal products in favor of these other products is better is not true at all. These are some pictures I took in Wyoming recently. We were there twice in the past few months because we have a campaign to try to save the few wild horses that are left in the West. These are pictures of the horses living as they should be free, but the problem is what's going on now is that because these wild horses are scapegoated by ranchers in the West, right now there's still a roundup going on in Wyoming. There's less than 1,000 wild horses in the entire state of Wyoming, and this is a state that has more than 300,000 cattle on public lands and many more sheep. And these are public lands that our tax dollars pay for, and the ranchers get a heavily subsidized rate to graze their cattle. And the wild horses that are supposed to legally be protected on those lands are being driven off. These are just some photos of what happens when the Bureau of Land Management chases these horses with helicopters on this death run. Then they truck them, they bring them to these dismal holding prisons, and this is one that I was in recently, took these photos there, and you see, nursing foals, and it's a horrible situation, and these horses are supposed to be wild. And they're taken off the lands, put into these prisons, and just held indefinitely and sometimes sent to slaughter. So this is a tragedy. So the idea also that somehow the labels that have sustainable or local are better for the environment is also completely false. So just for instance, for cows, if we raised all the cows in the United States on grass, and that's 100 million of them, that would require using half of the country's land just for cattle. So can you imagine if we transitioned all the factory farms and people were eating the same amount of meat and we made that into grass-fed free range, what would happen to the planet? So that is not possible. And in terms of the idea that it's somehow healthier to eat these products, that's also not true. For an example, a 2009 study found higher rates of salmonella in free-range pigs, greater levels of the pathogen Toxoplasma, which is a parasitic disease. And also habitat destruction. Switching to more so-called humane free-range grazing practices for confined animals would drastically increase already perilous levels of wildlife habitat loss and species endangerment or extinction. So we literally have no way to survive on this planet and do this. So to give a little background into where we stand on this issue and, historically, I'd like to go back in time to 2005, almost a decade ago, when Whole Foods unveiled their plan to implement farm animal compassion standards. So there was a press release put out. Hold on, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties here. Okay, here we are. So there was a press release put out by Whole Foods in 2005 to promote their 5-step ranking system for animals slaughtered to be sold as meat in Whole Foods stores. We recognized the danger then in applauding or promoting this scheme and the destructive impact it could have on consumers and the general public by steering them away from factory farmed meat products and towards humanely raised animal products. Our stance has always been that all animal farming is the problem, regardless of the size of the farm or the method of how animals are bred and raised for slaughter, and that's the message we consistently put out. The antidote to the horrors of animal farming is veganism. There's no need to dilute or confuse our message of compassion by making only factory farms the problem. And whoa. What was that? Okay. Friends of Animals was the only national or international group that protested Whole Foods Market's so-called farm animal compassion standards, endorsed by Peter Singer and 17 other animal charities. We opposed the notion of Whole Foods' idea of conflating compassion with eating animals, and we still do now more than ever. The animal compassion standards, and these are just them. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Whole Foods in this situation. So these are the rating standards and what they say they contain. So whatever they call these animal compassion standards, the truth is that these animal farms, no matter how local, organic, and grass-fed their operations, are still death row for every single animal. And that's the message that we, all of us here as animal advocates, must promote. Now more than ever, when these products are becoming increasingly popular and available. This is actually just our press release that we put out in 2005 when we first learned of this, idea that they were coming up with these animal compassion standards. Just the idea that they would use the word compassion is obscene. So if you've ever been inside a Whole Foods market, and I'm guessing everyone here has, yes? Yeah. You've likely seen the meat section covered in marketing slogans aimed at convincing shoppers that the dead packaged animals for sale all led lovely lives. This is actually a picture I took at my local Whole Foods, and that's the butcher, and behind him are the big plaque of their 5-step animal welfare rating programs. So the meat cases are covered in messages related to their 5-step animal welfare rating program. And details on what the 5 steps entail are laid out on the glass cases. You pretty much can't get away from seeing these things when you're looking at the meat. And they even have attractively produced color brochures entitled Whole Foods Meat Market Animal Welfare that are stacked on the meat counter. The cover of this pamphlet portrays idyllic farms where cows graze on open fields along with turkeys, chickens, and pigs. The very animals for sale at the meat counter that have the seal of approval under Whole Foods rating program. And I actually we have some of these just to show around, if people just want to look through them to see how disturbing it is. You'd think it was an animal sanctuary that they were promoting. So inside the pamphlet is this description about the global animal partnership and its connection to Whole Foods' 5-step. What is that? Okay, sorry about that. So this is what it actually says inside there. Founded in 2008, Global Animal Partnership is a nonprofit organization that was the first to bring together farmers and ranchers, retailers, and animal advocates, a diverse group with the common goal of improving the welfare of animals in agriculture. It goes on to say, all beef, pork, chicken, and turkey in our fresh meat cases must come from producers who have achieved certification to Global Animal Partnership's 5-step animal welfare rating. So they go on to say that as of June 2012, approximately 1,900 operations that supply Whole Foods Market, raising more than 147 million animals annually, are certified step-rated farms and ranches. So just let that sink in, because that 147 million animals, and that isn't even close to the total number of meat and animal products sold at Whole Foods. That's just the ones sold under this 5-step animal welfare rating program. So the truth is that Whole Foods has become one of the country's largest meat and animal product sellers. And were you a bit shocked when the description of the Global Animal Partnership Meat Labeling Program was described as including animal advocates? You may wonder why animal advocates would be involved in a marketing scheme to sell more meat to the public. So who was involved with Whole Foods' Global Animal Partnership Meat Labeling Program, which admits to profiting from 147 million dead animals every year? Well, Wayne Pacelle, CEO and president of the Humane Society of the United States, is on the board of directors of the Global Animal Partnership, along with John Mackey, co-founder and CEO of Whole Foods, Leah Garces, USA Director of Compassion in World Farming, and Paul Willis, a manager at Nyman Ranch and an operator of a free-range pork farm, in addition to several others, including more animal farmers. And guess who also happens to be on HSUS's board of directors? Well, that would be John Mackey, CEO of Whole Foods. They were both appointed to each other's boards in the same year, 2009. This may be unsettling news for some of you, and it should be, as HSUS is the country's largest and wealthiest animal welfare group. So does everyone here know Nyman Ranch? You're familiar with it? So it's a Northern California-based meat company, and this is actually some of their promotional materials. Again, you'd think it was a sanctuary. It's frequently portrayed as an ideal company to procure humanely raised meat, and they've expanded their network to include 700 independent American farmers and ranchers under the Nyman Ranch name. And they boast that whether raising hogs, cattle, or lamb, animals will be humanely raised by the largest network of U.S. family farmers and ranchers, never given antibiotics or added hormones ever, and fed only the finest all-vegetarian foods. And the truth is that this is what they all become, of course. And I don't know how clearly you can see, but even the packaging, like in the middle, it says "raised with care" on the package of dead animals, and the pork, the hot dog, is named Fearless. So it's just very unsettling. And in 2007, the owners of Nyman Ranch were invited to HSUS's Taking Action for Animals conference in Washington, D.C., and they gave a presentation to the crowd of animal advocates aimed at convincing them that the animals they slaughtered and sold had great lives. They even presented a slideshow of their frolicking animals as if portraying themselves as an animal sanctuary instead of animal killers, which is what they are. They never alluded to the fact that all the animals would be slaughtered the same way as animals on any other farm to end up on dinner plates. When animal killers are invited to a conference claiming to be about animal advocacy, the animals are in deep trouble. And Whole Foods was a main sponsor of this HSUS conference, in which Nyman Ranch and other animal-killing farmers were given a platform. So we can begin to see that Whole Foods, HSUS, and Nyman Ranch and other animal farmers are all interconnected, and they're benefiting financially from working together. And Joe Maxwell is a vice president of outreach and engagement in HSUS, and he's also a pig farmer. And his pig farm sells pork certified by the Global Animal Partnership to Whole Foods and other markets. And his position at HSUS is literally designed with the goal of expanding the meat market for humane meat. So what does this mean for the animal advocacy movement? Another point I'd like to make about the connection with HSUS is that HSUS's international affiliate, Humane Society International, created a humane choice product labeling program in 2006, and it offers products to Australian and the New Zealand public from animals who basically live their lives as they would have done on Old MacDonald's farm. That's literally what they say. So HSUS actually has a humane meat, program. So these humane meat products and cage-free eggs are becoming ubiquitous. New Whole Foods markets are popping up everywhere, and Trader Joe's and many other markets now sell happy meat products as well. So it's incredibly easy for the public to believe, thanks to misleading, fraudulent marketing labels and the confused messages from some animal advocates. that they can continue to eat all the meat, dairy, and eggs they want and still be making a compassionate, sustainably, environmentally correct choice. The meat, eggs, and dairy being peddled at Whole Foods that come from humane farms are portrayed as the opposite of the evil that goes on at factory farms. The goalposts have been moved away from veganism as the humane, responsible choice for consumers and instead towards humane animal products. To further drive this point home about all of this interconnectedness and the collusion between some animal groups that urge the public to end factory farming and instead they advocate for humane meat and those that profit from it, I'm showing you right now, this is something that's currently on the Nyman Ranch website. So under a section titled, "You can help create better living conditions for farm animals by following these tips." Can everyone see that? Yeah. So the first suggestion is vote with your fork. Purchase products from retailers like Whole Foods. The last suggestion is make an impact. Pledge to make a difference to helping end factory farming. Make a donation to the Humane Society of the United States End Factory Farming campaign. So there's a direct donation link to the HSUS End Factory Farming campaign on Nyman Ranch's website. So you can see how it all comes full circle. When the end factory farming message is directly tied into meat sellers, the animals lose. It's a betrayal for animal advocates to wrongly portray Nyman Ranch or any meat and animal product peddler as a humane choice. The only humane choice for animals, the environment, and human health is to boycott all animal products and to educate and advocate for a vegan diet. So, and just to make a final point on this end is in August of this year, the HSUS was the main sponsor of this sickening event called Hoofin' It in Denver. This is the actual ad for it. So this event was a 4-night farm-to-table guided culinary tour through 4 Denver neighborhoods. And in each neighborhood, you eat a different hoofed animal. And who was the main sponsor of this event? HSUS. So you can imagine that many of their members and advocates were horrified about this. And the response from HSUS was just, very flimsy, not really apologizing. But I don't think there really would be an apology because this ties into what they're doing. And I think that needs to be called out. And I think as animal advocates, and if any of you are members of HSUS, you need to oppose this because this is destructive. This is not going to lead to the end result that we all want as animal advocates. So to go into a different section right now, we're going to talk about the issue of palm oil. Do many of you here know about the palm oil issue? Okay. So this is also very important to our animal rights advocacy, veganism, environmental destruction, climate change, other species, and each of us as our own choices as consumers, even as vegan consumers if you're vegans. This issue of palm oil, many of you might wonder, why is this so important? Why should we as animal advocates care? Because it's just a vegetable oil, so how bad could it be? How much damage could this really do to the world? Well, palm oil is the cheapest oil in the world to produce, and oil and palm oil plantations cause deforestation, which severely threatens many species of animals, including elephants, Sumatran tigers, and especially orangutans. In fact, experts predict that if palm oil production continues at its current rate, orangutans will be extinct in 5 to 15 years. And shockingly, 50% of all prepackaged products, including innocent-seeming vegan butter, cream cheese, peanut butter cookies, including Oreos, chocolate, lipstick, body lotion, laundry detergent, shampoos, soaps, and more contain palm oil. So human-caused threats to the survival, and this shows just some of the different terms that are used to describe palm oil in products. And remember that if it's 50% of all products, probably everyone here is unwittingly using them. So the human-caused threats to the survival of orangutans, chimps, rare monkeys known as drills, and other primates and endangered species have escalated as their habitats are erased at an alarming rate. Palm oil, again, the cheapest cooking oil in the world to produce with the highest yield of any crop, was once seen as a healthy alternative to trans fat, and it's now become a global industry, and palm oil farming is causing deforestation. It's devastating habitats for primates, and it's important to remember that half of all prepackaged foods include palm oil. And I can guarantee that many of you here today probably use products that have palm oil every day. So again, what's the big deal? Well, 85% of palm oil comes from Indonesia and Malaysia. And these are rainforests that are crucial habitat for orangutans. And these animals are rapidly disappearing when forests are destroyed to make way for palm oil plantations. A 2007 United Nations Environmental Program report identified palm oil plantations as the biggest cause for deforestation in Malaysia and Indonesia. Orangutans are highly endangered. These tree-loving great apes share almost 97% of our genes. They depend on forests, and when their habitat disappears, they often starve to death or are killed in the fires used to clear-cut forests. And they're killed for food or in retaliation when they move into areas and raid crops because they have no other food sources. And when orangutans become trapped and isolated in any small fragments or stands of just a few trees that remain, they're made more vulnerable to poachers who want to supply the illegal pet trade. And these are some photos of what goes on. Poachers snatch the baby orangutans from their mothers, who will fiercely defend their babies. And this often results in the mothers being clubbed and beaten unconscious or even burned alive. A human population increase coupled with financial interest in palm oil plantations is decimating orangutans and other animals who need rainforests to survive. Cameroon is home to 80% of the world's remaining rare monkeys known as drills. And as the human population expands, palm oil plantations expand, and this threatens the drills and their habitats. And the same is true of chimpanzees in Cameroon, as a company there hopes to seize control of forests for palm oil. And in the rainforests of Central and South America, spider monkeys are threatened by shrinking habitat when forests are converted to plantations. So preserving trees not only allows native primates and others to simply live, it's key to preserving the Earth's atmosphere. And lemurs in Madagascar, which are found nowhere else on the planet, are endangered from deforestation also. And Madagascar has lost 90% of its wild lands. And there are similar stories everywhere where areas are logged so that cattle, goat, and sheep grazing takes priority. And the upshot of that puts the lives of gorillas, chimps, and other primates in peril. So an emphasis on plant-based foods is essential, yet scrutiny is needed to take the profits away from using palm oil and fueling such a destructive industry. And it's time for consumers, companies, and the government to close our borders to palm oil. And Friends of Animals wants companies to do better and stop using palm oil in their products. And there's been kind of a trend about, well, sustainable palm oil. So does that actually exist? And the answer to that is no, because there was a roundtable for sustainable palm which was formed in 2004 to address all these problems. But the problem is that they have weak certification standards, and companies can literally buy their way into getting this label. So that means it's meaningless. And there's no way to know where the source of the palm oil is coming from any one product. So there's just no such thing. I mean, about 42 million acres of land, more than the entire size of the state of Florida, are used for palm oil production to produce 60 million tons of palm oil. So just 16% of that product is classified as, the certified. So there's truly no conflict-free palm oil. The only solution to the palm oil crisis is for companies to ban palm oil from their products altogether and for consumers to boycott companies until they do so. The orangutans don't have time to wait for an industry to clean up its act. So what can all of you in this room do to take action on this issue? So Friends of Animals magazine Action Line, which is pictured behind us, we had a feature story on palm oil titled Rainforest Refugees in our spring 2014 issue. And I have a handout, it's actually on that table there. It's a double-sided handout. And this has, it has information for all of you detailing exactly what you can do. And it also includes a vegan butter recipe by Miyoko Shiner. She's the amazing lady who makes the vegan cheese. And this recipe is incredible, and until there's a commercial vegan butter that is made without palm oil, we can all make this one. And it's a very simple, delicious recipe, because I know a lot of people use Earth Balance, but that is made with palm oil. And there's a movement to try to get them to transition away from that. And that's going to take people not buying it until they demand to stop using this. Because even though technically it doesn't contain animal products, it's decimating these species and leading to extinction of a species. So the last part of my presentation will focus on what it means to advocate for animals beyond the message of go vegan. I'm going to start by saying that without a doubt, educating and helping the people realize how critically important it is to switch to a plant-based diet is crucial. Literally billions of animals every year are bred and slaughtered just for food, and ocean life is decimated, resulting in immense suffering, devastation to our environment and human health. But our message and work about our treatment of animals can't just end at animals used for food. There's an entire other category of animals that are in a crisis right now, and that's wildlife. Well, what about wildlife? We need to challenge and reverse the war on wildlife being waged at an unprecedented level. The world is on the brink. This is just a little graph of our own government agencies that we fund with our tax dollars, and the absolutely staggering amount in the millions that they slaughter every year with our tax dollars. So the world is on the brink of what is being called the sixth great extinction, and species are disappearing faster than ever. Who's heard about this? Okay. You'd think that this alarming fact would be on the cover of every newspaper and magazine, but that's not the case. A new study released recently by the journal Science, based on work by a Duke University biologist and others, highlighted that species of plants and animals are becoming extinct at least 1,000 times faster than they did before humans were around. So this study, it looked at past and present rates of extinction, and they find a lower rate in the past than scientists had ever thought. So species are now disappearing from Earth about 10 times faster than biologists believed. To put this into context, there have been 5 times previously when a vast majority of the world's life has been obliterated in what have been called mass extinctions, and that's often associated with giant meteor strikes, like that. About 66 million years ago, one such extinction killed off the dinosaurs and 3 out of 4 species on Earth. And around 252 million years ago, the Great Dying snuffed out about 90% of the world's species. So right now, we're on the verge of the 6th extinction, and whether we turn things around or not depends entirely on our actions. The number one issue is habitat loss. Species are increasingly finding no place to survive due to human overdevelopment into areas that were once their natural habitat. And tied into that in a big way is animal agriculture, which we detailed as being responsible for an immense amount of habitat destruction. In addition to the habitat loss to creating animal farms, an immense amount of wildlife are killed off by animal farmers who claim that wild horses, coyotes, and others are a threat to their livestock. So again, the number one cause is directly in the hands of human behavior and the choices we make. Another key factor is climate change, which affects where species can live. And a key cause of climate change is animal agriculture. So again, we come full circle. And a few years ago, there was a report put out by the World Watch Institute that said that greenhouse gases causing climate change, that animal agriculture is responsible for about 51% of that. So that's incredible. That's greater than all transportation sectors combined. And a lot of environmental groups and others focus on transportation sectors and kind of ignore animal agriculture, which is the elephant in the room. And fishing is another key factor leading to the 6th great extinction. We've completely decimated ocean life. Species like the oceanic white-tip shark used to be one of the most abundant predators on Earth and have now been hunted to the brink of extinction. More than half of marine species in the world may be at risk of extinction. Despite this grave situation, the U.S. has largely failed to protect marine species under laws like the Endangered Species Act. Of the over 2,000 species protected under the Act, less than 5% are marine species. Among the most serious threats to marine species worldwide is the voracious human appetite for seafood. Many groups of marine species, including sharks, groupers, and whales, are heavily impacted by anthropogenic threats, including destructive fishing methods like trawling and long lining, pollution, climate change, and ocean acidification. FOA's wildlife law program has legally challenged the federal government for failing to protect these imperiled marine species. We sued federal agencies responsible for failure to grant Endangered Species Act protections to several of these marine species. And these are just some of our current legal efforts that we're doing. We're protecting prairie dogs, endangered antelopes. We're doing litigation to protect barred owl removal, actually in Northern California, the Pacific Northwest. We're trying to stop the slaughter of bison in Yellowstone National Park, and we're working on listing a species of shark under the ESA. So some recent victories that we had were for last October, the National Marine Fisheries Service announced a positive 12-month finding on 5 sturgeon species that we petitioned for. And sturgeon are exploited for caviar. All 5 of these sturgeon species are now listed as endangered. So that's a huge victory, because getting them listed under the ESA means that the importation, selling, or possession of caviar or meat for any of these sturgeon species is illegal in the U.S. And scalloped hammerhead sharks are killed for their meat and fins. And this picture actually has shark fin soup, which is what they're most exploited for. They're also caught and killed in fishing operations targeting other species. And in July 3rd, 2014, the National Marine Fisheries Service made a positive finding on our legal petition to list 4 populations of scalloped hammerhead sharks under the Endangered Species Act. So that's a big victory for marine life. And one other recent victory is for a rare parrot species. They're now listed as endangered and threatened. So these species are they're targeted for the pet trade. So that was another great victory. So we're having some successes, but much more is needed, and we need the help and support of all animal advocates to really turn things around for animals. On a local level, there's so much that you can all do. Advocating for veganism is part of this, but we need to take direct action beyond that, especially for wildlife in our own communities, in our own backyards. That's where we can have such a big impact. And I can guarantee that every person sitting in this room, whether you live in an urban, suburban, or rural area, there's urgent wildlife issues happening in your area right now that you can get involved with. And much of my work at FOA involves organizing with communities in which local wildlife is under assault, and community members are desperate to save whatever species is under attack. That's often Canada geese, other species of birds, deer, and bear. So the goal is to transform attitudes and policies of intolerance and contempt towards wildlife to one of coexistence with other species. We've been successful in convincing several communities to cancel their plans to wipe out populations of Canada geese that were deemed a nuisance by some because of goose droppings in parks and athletic fields. We've also succeeded in getting planned deer hunts canceled. These successes depend on the collaboration of community members getting involved and demanding geese and other wildlife be allowed to live. And in most cases, it's simply educating local officials and park management that habitat modification and a policy to clean up droppings or install fencing will solve the perceived problems. Again, it's all about shifting attitudes. So ending this war, and I actually have a copy of something we produced that is very helpful in getting successes with stopping Canada geese from being targeted. We had an ornithologist put this together, and it just explains how you can modify habitat and parks so that you can coexist with geese instead of slaughtering them. So ending this war on wildlife, waged by our own government, by hunters, ranchers, and by people who consider other animals we share the landscape with a nuisance to be eradicated, is vitally important. Deer, bears, Canada geese, wolves, coyotes, wild horses, swans, owls, crows, squirrels, prairie dogs, fur-bearing animals, and so many more species are being threatened with slaughter, harassment, hunting, management by state wildlife agencies, and complete annihilation for daring to exist among humans in areas where our ever-increasing population and development takes what little natural habitat is left from wildlife. We reject the idea of making urban wildlife go away by harassing, sterilizing deer, and destroying eggs or waterfowl. We need to recognize that there is no away. We share the landscape with other animals, and it's our behaviors that need to be modified. Once we transform our attitudes, then we can begin to transform our actions and policies as a society. That strategy has been successful in teaching communities to coexist with geese, deer, and bear. So get involved, attend your community board meetings. Many of these decisions about whether local wildlife will live or die are decided in these meetings. So if you don't show up, no one's going to advocate for them. Your presence and your voice is needed to advocate for coexistence with our wildlife. Make your presence known to your local and state officials. Let them know that you care about these issues and that you want protection for wildlife, not persecution. Arrange to meet with them, call them up, and make it known that you care a lot about these issues and you vote. They will pay attention to that. You want a society and a community in which we learn to live with deer, geese, swans, bears, and other wildlife, and part of that is recognizing that we've created the majority of the problems that we blame on these other species. There's so many simple, easy ways to coexist and change our behaviors, and that usually is not what's being done, and it takes animal advocates to come in and do that. And a major part of the problem is that state fish and wildlife agencies depend in large part on money generated by hunting license sales and federal excise taxes on guns and ammo. This creates a clear conflict of interest in which these agencies are almost act solely in the interests of hunters and in turn the interests of the NRA instead of the interests of the general public and wildlife. There must be an independent source of funding made available for these agencies so that they're not beholden to those who want all wildlife dead. And FOA has consistently exposed and challenged the bloody connections between the agenda of the NRA and hunters, which results in pushing guns into young children's hands and indoctrinating them into the violent hunting culture. This is actually just a picture of rifles that are specifically made for children, for very young children. The pink one, they make it for girls. So statistically, the numbers of hunters have been decreasing. So it's necessary to hook younger and younger kids into hunting. And this is often through wildlife killing contests that target squirrels. So these young kids, and in different states, the ages are different. In New York, it's 12. In some states, toddlers can hunt with their parents. So for these wildlife killing contests, young kids are rewarded with prizes in these contests that act as a gateway to hunting larger and more animals. And Friends of Animals is involved with pushing for state legislation in New York to pass that would ban all wildlife killing contests. And passing this law in New York would set a precedent and would make it much easier to pass other laws across the state. There's no place in a civilized society for these kind of contests. We've organized protests of one such killing contest in upstate New York, sponsored by the local fire department, called the Squirrel Slam, and we've helped create a national dialogue that challenges these heinous contests and that connects the dots between gun violence, hunting, and the NRA. And these pictures are actual pictures from that event that we protested. The young girl has a pizza box full of dead squirrels. And these young boys are just, walking in with fistfuls of dead squirrels. They're getting them weighed, and they're getting prizes for killing. So psychologically, what is this doing to children? So this is just some photos of when we were there protesting. So we're legally challenging federal agencies on behalf of many species. We've recently filed a petition to the U.S. Secretary of the Interior and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to list the North American population of wild horses under the Endangered Species Act. We believe this is the only hope in preventing wild horses from being wiped out in western states. As I said before, for years, the Bureau of Land Management has waged outright war on wild horses and burros on behalf of Western cattle ranchers that use our public lands to graze their cattle and want the horses dead. This is just some recent photos of we had press conferences and protests at the actual holding pens where they ship these horses back. So we recently have had we brought a lawsuit against 2 federal agencies, Wildlife Services and Fish and Wildlife Services, for allowing the killing of snowy owls and other wildlife near JFK Airport in New York City. So we learned that snowy owls were being shot on site at JFK Airport. So we sprang into action, we got our members involved, we were demanding that the owls be relocated instead of shot, which is what other airports do. Why can't you relocate them? So I was interviewed by CBS News about this, and we declared our intent to file a lawsuit. And then the very next day that this news piece aired, the airport officials declared that suddenly they were changing their policy and they would no longer be killing owls, and they would instead relocate them. So the lives of countless snowy owls were saved by this decision. And while we were thrilled by this victory, we recognized the need to continue our legal strategy to force transparency and policy changes for all the wildlife needlessly slaughtered at airports. And the numbers are staggering. You would not believe the numbers of wildlife slaughtered at airports. And this is not how it's done in other countries, and it doesn't need to be this way. So our lawyers have argued this case in court, and unfortunately the judge's ruling didn't go in our favor, but we're appealing the decision because we think this is incredibly important. So we also have a campaign for, everyone knows what mute swans, these are the beautiful swans you see. In New York, though, the Department of Environmental Conservation literally wanted to wipe out the entire population of mute swans. That was their plan. So we worked to fight this. We got a senator that's very good on animal issues to introduce a bill to prevent this government agency from doing this because they weren't basing it on any science. Again, they're acting in the interests of the wrong groups. And the public outcry was tremendous. Swans are probably the most beloved species of waterfowl, and the idea that our state agency is going to wipe them out for no reason did not sit well. It was a huge issue, and we got involved, and we got this legislation introduced. The man to the left of me is Senator Tony Avella, and the bill passed in the Senate and the Assembly, which is amazing. So we're waiting for the governor to sign that into law. And this sets a very important precedent because it shows a way to stop our government agencies that are not acting in the interest of the public or wildlife, to stop them through legislation. So we're just waiting for the governor to sign this into law. The crazy thing is there's only 2,200 mute swans in the entire state of New York, and the DEC was acting as if they were weapons of mass destruction and they were creating all this devastation. So that's a great victory. And New York City, many of you might know, we're on the verge of banning horse-drawn carriages in New York City. The mayor has pledged to ban the industry. The legislation is about to be introduced. And this will be a huge precedent and make waves around the world because it will show that a tourist industry that exploits animals can be banned based purely on animal rights concerns. And the mayor de Blasio, he actually ran. That was one of his main campaign issues that he ran on. And I don't remember another mayoral race in history where animal rights was part of the platform. And he won by a landslide. So this is on the verge of happening, so that's going to be very exciting. And I'm a native New Yorker, and I can tell you that these horses have miserable lives. They suffer miserably. We've rescued some from slaughter. They don't belong in New York City. It's an insane situation, so it will be wonderful when that's banned. So just to sum up, if we don't intervene or challenge these assaults on wildlife, who will? We all have the power to make change, to pass laws, to change policies, and to transform attitudes that deem other animals as nuisances to be slaughtered at will and managed to extinction. Once our wildlife is gone, it's not coming back. Who wants to visit empty lakes, vacant of swans, geese, ducks, and other waterfowl, or parks in nature devoid of deer, wild horses running free, chirping birds, and other animals that are an important part of the ecosystem? Not me. And I'm guessing not anyone else here in this room. So another world is possible. And it's up to us as animal rights advocates to make it real. So please, I urge all of you to find out which wildlife issues need your help in the areas you live in. Your involvement, your voice can make the difference in these life or death scenarios. So thank you very much. And I think there's a few minutes for questions. And I want to just remind everyone to please take the palm oil handout because it's really important. You don't want to miss out on Miyoko's vegan butter recipe. Yes.
Can you share any knowledge you might have about parallel efforts going on around the world and how effective they are?
On which particular issues?
On the whole thing, just saving wild animals.
Right.
In general.
Well, I think there's not that many groups focusing on these issues, and that's why I wanted to talk about this. But I think that do you mean outside of the United States? Right.
Yeah.
I think in a lot of ways, some other countries are more progressive than we are. Like for the issue of wildlife at airports, other countries, like in Israel, they use, and Holland, they use bird radar detection, which we're not using. And the Navy and our own Air Force uses this. This is a technology we should be using. But instead, we have very antiquated attitudes here about wildlife and how to deal with them. Mainly, it's just about killing. So it's this cycle of killing. So that's part of what we're doing to educate, is that we need to evolve beyond this. Look at what other people in the world are doing. In Canada, they have it's more about educating people about how they can evolve and learn to live with animals and shifting away from the kill, kill, kill. So other countries are doing it better than we are, and that's a disgrace. Yes?
Thank you for your really outstanding and articulate presentation.
Thank you.
Very inspiring.
Thank you.
I think I like when you use the term elephant in the room.
Yes.
Because the elephant in the room, from my point of view, is human population growth.
Yes. Yes.
I haven't really seen too many animal rights groups advocate for people stopping breeding of themselves.
Well, we actually do take that issue on. We don't shy away from that. We do take that on, and you're very right about that, because overdevelopment is a part of this. And as the population keeps exploding in an unsustainable way, there's not going to be any room for anything else. And this is in a big way tied in. So you are right about that. And Friends of Animals does talk about that. And I think we should probably make it something that's more upfront. So thank you for bringing that up. I think we should maybe create some literature on that, educate people more about that, about, smaller family planning. Yes. Yes.
I just am not sure why every time somebody's pregnant or has a baby, it's a celebration.
Right.
Culturally, it is a party. Yay, wonderful,
Right.
congratulations. But it's a problem.
Right. I think it's just, again, it's trying to transform and change some deeply held values and beliefs, and that takes time to change, but it has to start with each of us and transforming ideas and just educating people that, this is an unsustainable way to live, and what can we do to make things better. So yes.
Along the lines of what this lady was just saying, the real problem isn't overpopulation. Human overpopulation, the real problem is overconsumption. On a vegan diet, the world needs to support
Right. Well.
the world's cattle alone consume enough to feed 8.7 billion humans.
Right.
For every acre of land in the United States, the drop down for urbanization. 7 acres are the drop down to create grazing land, for land for growing feed for animals.
Right. I think you're both right. I mean, I think they both are tied in together, and you can't really separate them. But certainly, if everyone transitioned to a plant-based diet, it would have a much shorter, a lower carbon footprint. But I do think the human overpopulation issue, because it's funny, because the issue is always about, we're going to control other species. We need to manage them. We need to hunt them. There's an overpopulation of this and that. But really, the overpopulated species is human beings, and we're the ones doing the most destructive things, but we blame it on other species. So we need to reverse that way of thinking. Yes?
I just want to encourage everybody to see and promote the film
Cowspiracy, yes. That's screening right out there. It's tonight, yes. It goes very deep into all of these issues, and it calls out the environmental groups that are asleep at the wheel about these issues. And that is very important to do, because they're failing, the world by doing this. So this film, I think, will really help shake things up in that way and educate a heck of a lot of people. Did you have one? Oh. Okay, I think we're already over time, so thank you everyone. And please don't forget to take the handouts and stop by the Friends of Animals table, pick up some restaurant guides and vegan starter guides, and have a great rest of the day, everyone. Thanks.